Here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, here we are today, Halloween Day, remind you. So the title of Serge's talk is Trump winning in the November 3 election. All of us are dreading that. The prediction of a sociophysics model by Professor Serge Galam from Sevipov in Sciences Po, Paris, France. Serge, of course, has spoken in September, but I'll still give him, introduce him for those of you who were not in his first talk. Serge is a senior scientist emeritus at CNRS and Sciences Po since 2017. This is in Paris. His research in physics has focused on disorder and collective phenomena in condensed matter. In addition, at the beginning of the 80s, he started founding the modern field of sociophysics with several seminal contributions. His sociophysics work investigates the dynamics of group decision-making, spreading of minority opinions, rumors, voting outcomes, terrorism, coalition and fragmentation among countries, and so on. In the fall of 2016, using the principles of sociophysics, he predicted the election of Donald Trump. I was fortunate to be the editor of the journal that published it, which very few people saw at the time. He received a doctorate degree in physics, statistical physics of dense matter, at the Pierre and Marie Curie University in Paris in '75, obtained a PhD again in physics, multi-critical points in random field magnetic systems at Tel Aviv University in 1981. From '81 to '83, he was a postdoc at the City University of New York, moving on to an assistant professorship at New York University from '83 to '85. In 1984, he returned to France and joined CNRS, and in 1999 became a directeur de recherche, senior researcher. From '84 to 2004, he has worked at several physics labs at the Pierre and Marie Curie University. In 2004, he joined the Center for Research in Applied Epistemology of the École Polytechnique in 2013. In 2013, he joined Sevipov, which is the institution with which he has current affiliation, the Center for Political Research of Sciences Po, becoming the first physicist ever. So with that introduction, let's get going. There you go, Serge.
Okay, thank you for this introduction, and thank you for this challenging second talk, because now we are like 3 days, ahead of the election, and so it's not so easy. And in addition, to give a follow-up talk, well, most of it is the same, was not an easy task, because I did not want just to use the same slides. So I rebuilt the whole thing with much less detail about how the model is built. If you want the detail, you can go to the YouTube video. So now it's clear in the title, the claim is Trump winning in the November 3 election. More than 1 month ago, beginning of September, it was a question with the answer at the end. So just a minute, okay. Mm-hmm. So it's Halloween Day. Is it a relevant information for all the talk? In this, we will, we'll have some answer in 2 weeks, maybe, when the result will be known. People can make joke about it. So in 3 days, the game is over. According to this sociophysics model, Trump will win again. And there is a warning here, which is important, as we started to mentioning at the beginning. It's a very hot and highly sensitive issue, of course, and the issue will have enormous consequence, of course, on the US, but on all the world. But yet, it's important to say that here I am developing an art science approach to a political event, and I am not dealing with a choice being right or wrong. I am not advocating for one candidate. I am trying to focus on identifying the hidden mechanism which drives the dynamics of opinion between two competing choices to anticipate the one which will eventually end up above 50%. And here I apply this generic approach to this election. So the main question is, are we back 4 years earlier? If you remember, Trump was predicted to lose the election by almost every analyst, scholar, pundit, polls. And during past week, they have kept assessing the same sources that Trump will lose the coming election. And I would say, even myself, this time, I still don't believe my prediction can come true with my feeling, with what I see, but this is all interest of the approach. And although the difference from the model, it's not the same driving force which will make him win according to the model. So let's go directly to the main ingredient of the model and see after the important element which we are interested here. I have two kinds of agents. I have floaters, which are agents which do have an opinion, and they have reason to choose this opinion. However, they are susceptible to shift their current opinion in case you give them very strong arguments. So they are looking for the best choice. They did come to a conclusion, but they are listening to argument, even if they advocate for their own choice. And then we have the inflexible. These are stubborn, committed people which will not change their mind, whatever may happen, whatever argument you can give them. So we have these two kind of person within our population, and we have two competing choices, A and B. Here it's Trump or Biden, and we start with some initial support. I designate the P0 for A, the proportion of people which intend to vote for A, and 1 minus P0, the proportion of people which intend to vote for B. I consider here everyone has made a choice. Now the proportion P0 of A is split in two parts. There is a proportion A of inflexible, so this proportion will not change as there are the people which are stubborn on their choice. And we have P0 minus A floater. On the B side, we have B inflexible and 1 minus P0 minus B floater. Now, how the dynamics work? Agents are randomly distributed in group. Here I choose of size 4. In reality, I have a distribution of size, but now to make it simple, I restrict all the group to size 4. Now, once I have distributed all the agents, I update locally the opinion of the people within each group according to a majority rule. However, the majority rule applies only to floaters, not to inflexible. So an inflexible votes, but does not follow the result of the vote in case it is in minority. Also, at a tie, the group is doubting and decide by chance, but according indeed to the activated prejudice. So to account for a distribution of different prejudice, I make the choice that the case AA, BB will go to 4A with probability K and 4B to probability 1 minus K. Just a minute, I am trying to see how I can have only one view here. Does not work. Okay. Okay. Well, do you see the full screen, or do you see all the picture there of people?
No, we see the full screen with this tipping point in opinion dynamics.
Okay. So now the equation, the update equation for this case of size 4 with inflexible and tie-breaking prejudice, I can have the equation here, which is written here. And before, it was very difficult to have the whole picture, the whole equation for any size of the group, because you have to compute it and it's kind of heavy. However, recently with a colleague from Japan, Taksu Sheon, we were able to derive a universal formula in a space of 5-dimension parameter. And then I can have the equation for any size. And this is, I extract from this paper, it just appeared in Frontier of Physics, in physics. And then this is the equation for size 4 with A, B, and K. Now, once we have the equation, we want to know what is the associated dynamics. And in order to get the dynamic, we have to solve the fixed point equation P1 equal P0, which means what are the value of P which are invariant under the whole dynamics we are implementing. We will find that indeed we have a non-linear dynamic driven by tipping point, but not always. And this is also the new result here. So let me show you the different effects. So first, if I consider the effect, the impact of prejudice effect without inflexible. So then the equation, I take A equal B equal to 0, and the equation now is very simple. This corresponds to a case 4A, stay A, 3A, 1B, so the 1B will go for A, and this is a tie, 2A, 2B, with a probability K, it go for A, 1 minus K, it go for B. And you see already that depending on the value of K, if you benefit or not from the prejudice, the dynamic is very different, but with a tipping point. If you don't benefit from the prejudice, the tipping point is very high at 77%, which means you will have a majority collapse in case you start from very high support of 70%, yet the ongoing discussion will reduce your support and you will go below 50% and lose the election. On the other side, if you benefit from the prejudice, it's enough to start above 23 to increase your support spontaneously by people discussing and then going above 50%. Let's see. Now, here is a picture where I have an initial support of 24% for A, and you see, depending on K equal to 0 or K equal 1, the result is totally different. So it's a very important element. And Trump has been, for last election, playing with this different scenario here. But this technique deployed in 2 steps, according to the model. First is shocking statement where infuriating people, pushing them to initiate more debate with other people to say why this is not acceptable and why you should vote for Clinton. So this was creating a falling of his support. But at the same time, this emotional reaction was unfreezing deep locked prejudice among many voters. And then this was reordering the hierarchy of prejudice playing at a tie at the benefit of Trump. However, when he was in the first step losing support, in order to benefit from the tie effect, and he will benefit, but in order to have this effect to increase again in support, the falling has to stop at a point above the tipping point in order to go up, because this is a tipping point dynamics. Here I have an illustration where I have a combination of group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for this combination, the tipping point value was at 83.7 when K is equal to 0. So even if here Trump was starting from 65%, the ongoing discussion was diminishing his support. Now, when he makes a shocking statement, he loses a lot of support, and then he fell down here to 16.2. However, at the same time, we pass from K equal to 0 to K equal 1, which make the tipping point moving from 83.7 to 16.3. However, the falling here, you see, is below. So he will still lose support, despite the fact that he is benefiting from the prejudice. Here it's a difference. Here the falling took him to 16.4, just above the tipping point. So now the ongoing discussion will increase in support and he will win here. So you see how you need these two mechanisms, which mean that you need to have in this state to have also a kind of core minority of racist people or very prejudiced, because this guy, when the shocking statement is done, they keep saying, I will still vote for Trump. This is not a tie effect, it's a personal choice. Okay, now let's see. So we see how the prejudice effect create this tipping point dynamics, but can shift the value of the tipping point to very low or very high value. Now let's see what happened with the inflexible. So first I take out the prejudice. So in order to have no prejudice breaking, I take k equal half. So in case I have AA, BB, this gives me like 2A, 2B, nothing changed. So the equation now, the update equation is here, and it depends on A, because I am also taking first, the first situation is one-sided inflexible. So I only have inflexible on side A and no on side B. And then already we can see here some drastic effect, but yet it creates a tipping point dynamics. This is a situation in which I have no inflexible and no tie breaking. So you see that the tipping point is at 50%. It's totally balanced. Now here I increase a little bit the inflexible on side A. I denote, this is a notation, X is a difference between A and B. So when B is equal to 0, X is equal to A. So you see here I have 8% of inflexible for A. As X is equal to A, it means B equals 0, and no prejudice effect, dk equal to 0. dk is k minus half. So it's how far I am from the balance value. So you see that a little bit of inflexible modified the dynamics by taking the tipping point from 50% to a value of 44 down. So it creates an advantage for A. However, A still need to have a starting support above 44%. In the picture here, I start from 40%. And then as the tipping point is at 44, the ongoing discussion will decrease the support. Now here I increase the proportion of inflexible for A to 13%. And this put now the tipping point, which was at 44, down to 37. So now the same initial proportion will grow. The 40% now will grow and reach more than 50%. So you see that in a given situation, having more or less inflexible on your side and depending on your initial support can make the whole difference. Here you lose, here you win. This is an illustration to see how strong can be the inflexible effect when it's one-sided. I start from 20% support of A, and then 0 support, 0 proportion of inflexible, 5%, 10, 15, 20. You see that for 0, 5, 10, 15, not much happened, but then it jumped from 20, then you win. However, there is an unexpected phenomenon which is occurring here. It is the fact that indeed, when I increase the proportion of inflexible on side A, at some point, and this was a surprise, the tipping point coalesce with the attractor, one of the attractor, and then disappear, creating now a single attractor dynamic. Now, when I have a single attractor dynamics, it means that whatever are the initial condition, it will end up at this attractor. So if it's above 50% for A, for sure it wins. And if it's below, for sure it loses. In our case here, we find that the critical value is 15%. So let's see what happened. You see here I have a case 8% of inflexible, and here I have 16%. First case, I am below the critical value of 15, so I have the tipping point at 44. Now here I am above the critical proportion of inflexible, the tipping point disappeared. Now I have only one attractor at 1, which means that A is certain to win the election. It's enough for him to start above 16%. And then it will go at the beginning very slowly, and then it will increase very quickly. Let's now consider the realistic situation in which we have asymmetric two-side inflexible, which means A different from B, but X is different from 0, which means there is a difference. One of the candidates has more inflexible on his side. And then still, I don't consider here prejudice effect. So dk is equal to 0, which means k is equal to half. In this situation, the coalescence of the tipping point and one of the attractors still occur. However, now I have now two critical values of proportion of inflexible, x1 and x2. When I am between these two critical values, which means when the difference in the proportion of respective inflexible for A and B is less than some higher value and larger than the other critical value, I still have a tipping point dynamics. Now, if X is positive, the tipping point is less than 50%. If X is negative, it's above. So this shows if A has a little more inflexible, which means X positive, so he has the advantage that the tipping point is below 50%. If it is B, so the tipping point for A is above 50%. However, when the difference in this respective proportion go beyond XC1 or below XC2, then I go to one single attractor dynamics. And the first case, A win always, and the second case, A lose always. Which means that here, if you succeed to have an additional support in inflexible above this value for X or below this one for B, you are certain to win the election. This is an illustration of the first scenario where X is between XC1 and XC2. So we have here, the tipping point is at 47 because X is 0.202, which means I have 14% inflexible for A and 12% inflexible for B. So the 2% difference in X yield still a drastic break in the democratic balance because now P need to be higher than 47 to win, while for B, 1 minus P, it has to be above 53%. So we have a 6% barrier, and this can be very serious when the initial support are not very much differentiated. This is a scenario where A has more inflexible than B in order to be above the critical value, and then we will move. This was the case where we still have the tipping point, so I have 14 and 2, and now here the difference you see is still the same, 2 and 2, but now A has 20%. So this shows that the value of XC1 and XC2 does not depend only on the difference A minus B, but also on the value of A. So you see now I move from this dynamics with a tipping point at 47, where now I have only one single attractor, which is dynamics, and the single attractor is at 74%, which means whatever is the starting point for the support of A, of course, larger than 20, because this is 20% of inflexible, then it will go up. This show here, it looks like a line, but this will take a lot of time. So you cannot predict it. If you will follow what happened, in all this area, you'll say, okay, not much happened, not much happened. But you need a lot of people discussing. And usually we can go rather quickly in this area when we are getting close to the election, because then the iteration of update is increased. So you discuss much more when the voting day is approaching. This is other side when X is less than XC2. So now I have moved from this situation 14 with the tipping point at 47. And now I still have 20% support for A in terms of inflexible, but now B has only 1% more, 21%. And this will put now the one single attractor at 32. So A will lose. So you see, it's a very sensitive to this little difference here. This is an important result. So now let's apply the model to the coming election. With respect to prejudice, will the same frozen prejudice effect be again instrumental? No, because of course, after 4 years with Trump president, people got used to his repeated shocking statement and no more indignation, no more emotion. People get annoyed, but not with this totally emotional reaction. Does it mean that prejudice will not play a role this time? No, because now this time the prejudice effect will still be working, but along the spontaneous prejudice. Trump, by his shocking statement, was reordering the prejudice hierarchy, but now it's a natural one which will decide. And I identified two main ones. I think one of the leading one will be the fear. And this is the fear which is the fear that Trump will get a second mandate, but also the fear that Biden will be elected. Of course, this will touch different population, but these two fears exist, and every candidate tries to increase the fear about the other candidate election. So both candidates are competing on the same path of fear, but each one wants that the fear will be bigger for the other one. And also I have the individual stand facing a danger, which is another prejudice. And this came out after Trump being infected by the COVID and cured from it. And so this is a kind of individual attitude facing a danger that you can be reckless or you can be cautious. So you say, I am strong, I just move, I don't care. Or depending on which one, say you are weak and then you are afraid. So this creates also a prejudice depending on different psychology of people. So these are two elements which I think will play an important role in the value of K. But in the model, what matters is the difference from K minus half. So if dk is positive, which means A benefit more than the prejudice, there are several ones, and if dk is negative, B is benefiting more from the prejudice. Now, with respect to inflexible, Trump has highly polarized American voter, creating this new situation to drive the coming voting outcome. Today, there are millions of voters which are blind Trump supporter or blind anti-Trump supporter. So what is going to matter in our modeling is the difference between A and B, which we saw it's represented by X. Now the prejudice effect is also available on each side. you have to galvanize your troop to make people more stubborn in your support. And this is a very important key to win the election. However, this time, these two phenomena, prejudice and inflexible, will be acting at the same time. And then we have three kinds of situations, because they can be both benefiting from the same candidate. However, we can also have the case where each one is benefiting to one candidate and then they compete. So what will matter, as I said before, it's the excess in the prejudice, decay, the sign of decay, and the excess of stubborn agent, the sign of X. The three situations are here. Either decay and X are positive. So in this case, both are playing at the advantage of A. This decay positive and X negative, prejudice playing for A, inflexible for B. Decay negative, X positive, this is playing for B, the prejudice, while the inflexible play for A. Now let's see how this results in the dynamics. Here I am first looking in a situation where I fix X, which means the difference in proportion of inflexible is fixed. And also the prejudice difference is fixed, decay is fixed, and I want to see what happens when I vary A, the proportion of inflexible for A. However, when I say that I am varying A and I fix X, which means that when A increase, B increase by the same amount. Okay, this is important. The difference stays the same. So you see the first graph here, I have 20% inflexible for A, as X in all these cases is minus 2%, which means that I have 18% for B. And in this case, decay is equal to 5%, which means I have 5% advantage for A for the prejudice, which means 55% against 45% for B at a tie. I have a single attractor dynamics at 65 here, so A will win whatever is happening. I go now to A equal 25%, still minus 2% for X, which means that B, little b, go now also to 23%, the same prejudice difference. Now you see that the attractor moved down to 53, while the difference between inflexible proportion is the same and the prejudice effect is the same, but both proportion has increased. Now, if I increase again the polarization of the full society, this is what I'm saying, you see now I have 30% inflexible for A, which means 28% for B, and the same prejudice effect. Now I have a hung election because the attractor is at 50%. If I increase again the total proportion of inflexible going to A equal 40% and then 38 for B, now this go down to 49. Now B is losing. And it's interesting because one could say, how come he is losing as his support in inflexible has increased and the difference with respect to B and prejudice is the same? So how come by increasing the whole effect, he will now, the attractor is at the benefit, not much, but of B. Now let's see, I fix A and I vary X and decay to balance one another. So in all this case, I have A is fixed at 36%. In the first graph, the difference in inflexible is only 1%, which means I have 36 for A and 37 for B, because it's negative now, so there is 1% more for B. In order to compensate this difference in inflexible of 1%, I need a difference in prejudice at the benefit this time of A of 2%. So I need a 2% advantage in prejudice to compensate a 1% advantage in inflexible. And then I am looking here to be balanced, so to see how I just compensate. If now I will double the difference in inflexible from 1% to 2%, so A is still 36, but now B will be 38. In order to keep the balance, I need to increase the prejudice effect by 4 to 8%, which means when I have double the advantage of inflexible, I have to multiply by 4 the advantage in prejudice to compensate. If I keep on still 36, but now 3% advantage in inflexible, which means now B is equal to 39. I have to multiply almost by 6 because I need now 11% in prejudice advantage to compensate the 3%. So we see here that the balance and the effect between the difference in inflexible proportion and in prejudice advantage is not linear. Indeed, we will see that high value of inflexible require much more effect from the prejudice. Here I fix A and X, which means I have 40% of inflexible for A in all these 3 cases, and I have 46% inflexible for B. So a large advantage of 6% for B. I calculate here what is the value in prejudice in order to compensate this 6%. Then I need 32% advantage in prejudice to have the 50% value. So you see that I have almost to multiply by 5 the difference, 6 and 32. Now, if I increase, I want to see how I can overcome the inflexible difference and make A win by the prejudice. Here I have increased from 32 to 40, and this has no effect. So now I multiplying by here 5, and here almost more than 6, almost 7, nothing has changed. So the increase of additional 8% in prejudice effect is not enough to compensate this 6% difference. I have to go to 41% in prejudice advantage to compensate this 6%. Now the attractor has moved to 51. So we see that the higher is the polarization, the more you need prejudice at your advantage to compensate in case this the inflexible go against you. So of course, after it will depend on each state which one has the advantage for each candidate. But this was a kind of non-expected effect. So what can we conclude? At last election, Trump found a martingale to win which could not be applied by Clinton. So it was going from K equal to 0 to K equal 1, and she could not make this shocking statement, of course. This would have gone against all her campaign and position, of course. But this time, the winning strategy is the same for each candidate. Unfortunately, it's not very glorious because it is to increase the stubbornness of your supporter and to increase the fear of the other candidate and to show, depending on your side, strength or caution with respect in particular to COVID. So in each state, the election outcome will be driven by these two quantities, X and decay. Tiny excesses will make the outcome. And this is why it's going to be, I think, rather subtle and not too many difference in ballot will create the winning the winning. Yes. So what can we say about DK and X? This is where the situation now is more, I would say, discutable, of course. So all what I have developed is very solid. And here I am saying that about stubbornness, we have a very high level of polarized people. A lot of people, millions of people are inflexible in this election. So we have blind Trump supporter, blind anti-Trump supporter, blind Biden supporter. I have put these two things because I think it's important, and this was maybe not enough taking into account, that blind anti-Trump supporter are not automatically blind Biden supporter. Also, of course, they much overlap. And in addition to this difference, Trump, from what I saw from here in the news, and I am not in the state, is that Trump has been much more involved on the ground to motivate his supporter. I mean, I saw meeting from on TV, of course, of Trump with respect to the meeting of from Biden, where people are in car and everything is closed, and while Trump, you have this big excitement. So this creates much more stubbornness from Trump's side than from Biden's side. So it can make little difference in X, but which will matter a lot. And the prejudice also, there is here a little advantage for Trump. Why? Because my perception is that the fear of Trump has been eroded. I'm talking about the fear because people don't want him to stay, but they know what he is doing and what he is going to do. So it is rational refusing of a second mandate. While the fear of Biden can be rooted in some phantasms which are irrational about he is going to make socialism in the state, or it will be open immigration or chaos. So this is usually create more fear when you play an irrational thing that you don't know with respect to refusing or fear of something that you know. There is also this attitude of being reckless or cautious facing a danger. And this will, of course, depend on the cultural difference in the all subgroup of the American voter. So this is the same as I had at the beginning of September, saying, although I have no access to neither the various proportion of respective inflexible in each state, not to the respective prejudice proportion, my rough estimate are that Trump has advantage in both in enough swing state to win. So this is why my conclusion is now that Trump will win the November 3 election. And I identified two additional mechanisms which can play at the benefit of Trump on the voting day. One, which are the hidden abstention for Biden. These are people, I think that there will be people which are anti-Trump and anti-Biden. And I guess many of them will come from very strong pro-Sanders. So for them, that means Biden is not really creating socialism in America, and they will not vote for him. So this is a kind of interrogating mark. What will be the proportion of this hidden abstention? People saying, we will vote for Biden, but they will not. And also the phenomenon of hidden voter for Trump. The media has been, and many people are so engaged against Trump that if you will have here and there someone which which decide to vote for Trump, it will not reveal his position not to create conflict with the people around him. So these are people which in poll will be lying about their voting intention. So I don't know what will be the proportion of these two phenomena, but both are playing at the advantage of Trump. So in conclusion, here I am getting to the end. Again, I must emphasize that my prediction is not about taking risk or becoming a guru or supporting one candidate or other. It's about a hard science approach to model political events. And if the prediction is successful, it will be the second one, but it will not mean that that's it, the model has been proven right, but that really it captures some essential feature of opinion dynamics. Now, if the prediction turn wrong, it will not mean that the model has to be thrown away, but just that I miss some feature which will need to be identified and integrated to the model. Here we are not dealing with a work in progress, we are dealing with a field in progress. So it's very important that we take a risk by making prediction, but the point is not to be right or wrong, but is like in physics, we can do experiment to check a theory and we can redo experiment. Here we cannot manage to say, okay, let's vote again in a country and vote again. So we have to take advantage of all real political events to make a prediction and check the validity of the model with respect to the reality that we try to approach. But of course, the model is not the reality. So this is why we need a lot of prediction and see how we can deal with the reality via the model. I complete from the last time a paper, a scientific paper about this, and I just put it in archive a few days ago, so you can have the paper and the details. So again, I talk about my book. You can download it from your library. There is an ebook version. And in 3 days, we will know if the prediction is wrong or right. And of course, we are all impatient to know. Now, maybe it will take more than 3 days, and this is an important issue, but which I am not addressing here with the mail voting. And I don't know how long this can take. But my prediction here is about the voting, not about going to vote or sending a mail. Of course, this I'm not taking into account. It's interesting also to note that from what I read, 70 million of Americans has already voted. However, from all my analysis, little differences will make the outcome. So every vote can make a difference in this. That means at least, of course, in the swing state. I'm not talking about California or New York, of course. Okay, thank you very much, and we can now discuss the issues and the model, of course.
Thank you, Serge. Let's give him an applause. You might want to unmute yourself so we can. We are open for questions. So let's.
So, Serge, I have a question. What happens if A is, say, 48% and B is 46%? But then you only need a little bit to put one candidate over the top, and how does it change then?
I think that this I cannot do it right now, but that means I have to put this in the equation, and then I will see the result. But what I can anticipate is that indeed it will be a small difference will again make the change. You see here, I have 40% and 46%.
Right, but then the point is, if it's like 48%, there's only a small change that's.
Yes. If I increase larger, I will look and I will send an email to Serge to say, so you want to see what, 48 and how much from the other side?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm asking is if if already lots of people are inflexible, so okay, then it's only a small amount that's needed to put the candidate over the top, and then this increasing, this monotonically increasing kind of behavior might for X might change.
So the point is, if I say I take 48 for one candidate, the question is which proportion I take for the other one.
Say 46. I mean, the difference
46?
might be 2%.
46, okay.
Yeah.
So then we will have 6% which can move from one to another side. Okay.
Right. Yes.
And then what I can check is for these 6% floaters, what must be the difference in prejudice to compensate this 2%
Right.
difference in inflexible.
Right, that's right.
Okay, so I will put this in the equation and I'll get the answer rather quickly later. But it's interesting. I went up to 40 and 46, but I did not push here more than. But I agree.
Right, but if you look at the polls, people have.
Yes. Yes. Right. I agree. I agree. So we will see. I'll check and send the result to Suraj.
Thanks. Nice talk, by the way.
Thank you.
Next question. Okay, I don't hear a question right now, but one of the things I was thinking about is that people discussing is an important point in your model, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, if I understand correctly, a big difference between the 16 and 20 election processes could be that the discussion is rather severely suppressed this time because of the silo type effects. So people who are pro-Trump and people certainly who are pro-Biden, not anti-Trump, but people who are pro-Trump and pro-Biden, those two groups, they may not be very interactive. And I wonder if that can potentially affect your calculations.
You mean that people which are inflexible will not discuss as much? This is what you are saying?
Yeah.
I think that the inflexible, they discuss, of course, a lot, but they discuss mainly if we are like the suggestion 48, 46, in all the group, people will share the same opinion. So you will have small group where you can have this floater, which can be one side or another, but yet there will be. So the question is, of course, maybe we have a segregation between the A inflexible and B inflexible, but again, this is like having part of the subpopulation which are already all A or B, all B. But this is what I will see in the case which was proposed, because still there, a little difference at the frontier between these two subgroups can play for one candidate or another, as if it's really depend to 1 or 2%. So it will not prevent the effect, because I think the more inflexible you have, the more people will be discussing. But this will increase their own inflexibility, because most of them will be discussing with people sharing the same view. However, we will have the case here and there of people sharing the other view, which can be convinced or will go to the other side at the frontier of this subgroup.
Yeah.
So this is also a critique which could be done to the model, saying, if I take a state, here I am like saying, that everyone in the state can talk with everyone in the state. Of course, this is not the reality, but you can reduce the model to, again, subgroups, network of people, and see this network will move to A, this one to B. So on average, it is equivalent to this.
Okay. The other question I had was about COVID, because one of the things that has happened is that the COVID, outbreak has hit people in the pocket, right? And a lot of people have died. A lot of family members have died, which has led to the component of anger, which is, as I was mentioning to you before, is probably an individual random field term. So one question is, what might the role of such a random field be? Because in this case, when you have, what, about 100 million people affected, I don't know what the numbers are, but it's enormous, right? So you can imagine that a very significant part of the population is subject to this random field, especially in the populated states, which are the decisive states. So that's another concern I have as to what might be the effect of that on the XTK competition. And you are muted. No, you are muted.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. This effect will play on both sides because on one hand, I guess, when someone lost some close person from COVID, of course, this will make it eventually inflexible against Trump, saying he did not handle the situation right. However, you have many people which get out of being infected. And so they can say, you know, that this was okay and not as bad as people try to tell us. In France now, we have the number of deaths, which is increasing again, the number of hospitalization, reanimation, and we have more and more papers, people saying, but this is nothing, you know, so bad if you compare to other illness, and we are, you know, being manipulated. And so I think this is a very important element in individual decision, but it will not go only one way, because you have millions of people which has been touched and infected by the COVID. So even if there is a large number of people which die, you have also a much higher number of people which get out of it without mentioning, and this is a big problem for the lockdown acceptation, then you have many young people which did not feel anything almost, so saying, you know, this is a joke, I'm sick. And this creates a huge gap when you go to hospital and see what is going on, and when, depending on where you live and what you do. Up to last week in Paris, all the terraces were crowded of people, you know, talking without wearing masks, and they're saying there is no problem. So I think this is, again, I agree with you, but you have to take on both sides. So this will be creating some inflexible on each side. I cannot say what are the proportions for this.
Yeah, just one.
I think there's a follow-up question on that.
Yes, go ahead, Shudam.
You know, like in the US, you have 5 million people infected, but there are 200 million people who are infected by, or who are affected by the lockdown economically.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect that actually more people would actually be, in that sense, pro-Trump, because, you know, he was advocating for opening up.
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. Right? Yeah. So this is, it's not so one-sided point. I think it play on both sides.
Yeah, I think, you know, for rational people, it's clear his policy is, or his leadership is just zero or negative. Mm-hmm. But for, I think most Americans are not rational, are emotional more.
Not only American, I think, you know, all over the world, unfortunately.
No, I think it's Westerners mostly.
Where?
The so-called civilized Westerners, the Europeans and American whites are like that, because they cherish liberty much more than their life. You know, I think I'm a Chinese. When I grew up, I remember we were taught very sort of in a very admiring way of some European who wrote a poem that, you know, love is important, life is important, but for freedom, I can sacrifice most. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's like held as ideal human being. So I think that's sort of inherently in the European, the Western civilization. You know, liberty is the number one thing that is most important. You know, in China, why the whole population just follows the government in the lockdown? and not complain that much. You know, the complainers are very few
Mhm.
because they find that in the Chinese culture, that life is sort of more important than liberty, you know. then people just follow like lambs.
Uh-huh.
While in the US, even when the scientific evidence are all clear, people
Mhm.
don't care, you know. Yeah, I
Interesting
think it's
point.
more culture than.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a good point.
But
Nice talk. Nice talk.
one point
Thank
to
you.
my defense is, you know, go back to December or November last year, and it was not easy to conceive a scenario where Trump would not be getting a second term. The economy was doing very well. There was no real you know, issue hitting people in the pocket. You know, individual feelings
Mhm.
were coming out in a way that was much more random, perhaps. Whereas, you know, when Biden, this guy, old guy, he was reluctant to run. He was kind of, you know, brought in kicking and screaming. And we don't remember almost that he has gone from being, you know, facing a lot of questions to facing much less questions now. He's kind of seen as a very reasonable choice. So that's also a change that has happened. So there has been a dynamical evolution, if you will, in the thought process of the electorate.
Mhm.
And how that plays in, it manifests as in dynamics of X and decay. So X and decay have their intrinsic fluctuations, which may not be small,
Mhm.
and that may also be there in the system.
Yeah, this is a good remark because, as you say, up to last December, the economic situation in the state was very, very good. But what is known from other situations that there is no much memory in when you have an election. This is what is interesting. That means people are taking more on their emotion, what every candidate say on the program, and they are not like saying, but you know, let's see what has been done, what if it's positive or negative. But this will play really, I think, on the distribution of the floater. I don't know if this will change some inflexible, but maybe this I cannot answer because the memory is something which is very difficult to take into account of what was the situation. Now, when you know, it seems clear that Trump mishandled the COVID crisis. However, I would say that I don't see any country which did handle it well. So it's also some very difficult question because here and there, like we have in France, people say, oh, they made mistake, we should, but okay, if we would have, you know, cases where say, okay, there the guy had a right policy and get out of the situation, but we have now a second wave everywhere and the situation is getting bad everywhere. And so there is a policy, the politics, the attitude, but there is a fact that we are facing a very dangerous virus, which we don't understand, we don't know yet well, and we are yet not knowing how to react. And everywhere, it's the same. So I don't, at some point in Europe, they were saying we have Sweden, where they have having no lockdown, but now the situation is also getting very bad there. So there is no model. Alors, there is China, but it's very special and different, and we don't have much information. And what is done in China cannot be applied in Western countries or in America, so, or even in India or everywhere. So I don't know. So this is also a tricky point because you can see clearly the mistake of course, of Trump, and not only the mistake, the absurdity, but you can see elsewhere from different people, it was also making mistake, not in the same tone, not in the same direction, but the result everywhere is a catastrophe. So, so it's really, a bad thing. So I don't think it's really connected to the right policy, but it's more about our lacking of knowledge to face this virus.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you. This is a very good discussion. I wish, I don't want to stop hearing about it, but there's not much we can do at this point other than sit and wait. I remember 4 years ago, I was with Gemunu in Houston when we got the bad news, and the lights went off. so it's by the way, so just to tell you guys, I'm going to put this talk on my YouTube page and send you all a link. So you have Rajat Basu saying great talk.
Okay, thank you.
And so please feel free to look at it. I know a great many people look at those, and feel free to subscribe to the channel, because I think that helps in keeping the channel's activity high, which publicizes the series. So if you don't mind, just subscribe to it. And the other thing is that next week we have a talk on ecology by a younger person, Luca Grigioli from Bristol. So that should be interesting. And then the next one will have to be finalized. We are still working on that one. So there are some good talks coming up. Hopefully we will be alive on the next one and not so depressed that we are out of our mind. But thank you so much. Thank you, Serge, and thank you.
Thank you for listening and for your question. And now we are all waiting, as I say,
Yeah.
what is going to happen. But I don't know, is there a kind of rule that, we will have the definite result like 1 month after November 3, or it can take more? Is there a limit for counting, time limit, or no, or it depends on each state?
So I think the risk thing is that it's supposed to come. These people are supposed to meet sometime in December 10th or whatever. But if it is not decided by January 20th, the speaker ends up becoming the president.
Okay. No, but this is but there is no kind of law that the counting should be ended by a given time.
No.
No, but there is also another thing I heard, that elections can go to the House of Representatives, and actually House of Representatives, there is a Trump lead there. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, that's right. So each delegation from each state get a vote.
Yeah,
that's how it is.
And there are 28 on the Republican side and 22 on the Democratic side.
Well, except the ones numbers now is not what it is. It's going to be the new Congress.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Because I heard apparently not, but
it's the Congress in January. So.
Oh, okay. No, I was told that if this happens in December.
No, yeah, so this happens in January.
Oh, okay.
With the new Congress.
I see. Yeah, it'll be a tricky. Like I said, it's basically Florida and Pennsylvania at this point. It's from what I understand, it's just those two states. I mean, Texas is probably not going to go blue.
Yeah, unfortunately, no.
Yeah, and Arizona likely will go blue, but those two states, I think actually are probably close to Serge's analysis. So it'll be a very interesting. But then I think for Biden, it's a win if either of the two works. Yeah. But for Trump, it's not necessarily a win if either of the two works. So there is a difference because the pathways are different. But that's more detailed. That's for Serge's next version of the model. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye, Dr. Mohanty.